Welcome to the Bobby O Show. My name is Bob O. Potzner, and I have a very good show for you today, I believe. I hope you enjoy it. If you've watched many of my shows, you know that I'm a very fervent, fanatic college basketball fan. And I have today with me a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine, named Richard Kent, who's been on the show several times in different topics, but he is equally fanatic, if not more. He probably can't be more fanatic than I am in college basketball and other things. So we're going to talk about a book he has just written and other aspects of college sports. Introduce you to Richard Kent.
Hey, Bob. Thanks very much for having me.
Okay. Thank you, Rich. I'm glad to have you on the show. Richard, before we get into your new book, which I believe is called The Madness of Ivy Basketball, I want to talk about your background. In the beginning of the book, you talk about how you first got involved in interest in college basketball. I thought it was pretty interesting. I want to tell the audience your background in getting involved in college basketball.
Well, without to age myself, I grew up in New Haven. My grandfather and father took me a lot to Yale basketball games at Payne Whitney Gymnasium. And I saw the very tail end of Bill Bradley, and I saw great Yale teams led by Rick Kaminsky, and then great Penn and Princeton teams over the years. And I just fell in love with college basketball. I wasn't destined to go to Yale after I got my rejection letter, but I went to Rutgers. I was assistant sports editor of the Rutgers Daily Targum, and I just all levels and all aspects of college basketball. I never lost my love for Yale basketball, and I developed a strong love for Rutgers basketball while I was there. And I think for like a 30-year period, I didn't miss a Rutgers game on television, in person, or by radio.
You were nice enough to invite me to some basketball games at the RAC, which is the home court for Rutgers. And I believe, was it 1976 was the big year for Rutgers basketball?
Rutgers went undefeated in 1976, led by Phil Sellers, Eddie Jordan, Mike Dabney, James Bailey, and Hollis Copeland. And they fell 87-72 to Michigan in the national semis, and then lost 106-92 to UCLA in the last, I believe it was the last, no, it wasn't the last consolation game. It was almost the last consolation game.
And you've now written a few books about college basketball and other sports. The newest one we have is the book about the Ivy League. But I'd like to just mention briefly, one of my favorite ones, I haven't read the book, but that you've talked about so much with me, are the books you've written about Roger Federer. Tennis.
Yeah, I'm a huge tennis fan. I've had a press credential for the U.S. Open since 1992. In 1999, I always went to the boys' final on Sunday mornings. And in 98 or 99, I forget what, 99, I think, I saw this guy with a ponytail who had absolutely perfect strokes. I had never seen a more beautiful, rhythmic tennis player. It was Roger Federer from Switzerland, and within 2 or 3 years, he became number one in the world. I can't say that I ever developed a friendship with him, but I got to know him a bit through his agent, Tony Gotzik. And I wrote 2 books, Roger Federer Back on Top and Federer Nadal, which is about the Federer-Nadal rivalry, which is one of the probably top 3 rivalries in the history of men's tennis.
Let's have Jonathan show me the pictures, numbers 2 and 5, please. Who is the gentleman next to Richard Kent?
That's Roger Federer.
How long ago was that picture taken, Richard?
I'm going to say it's 05 or 06.
Okay, and 1905 or 2005?
Yeah, that's cute.
Okay, and where was the picture taken?
It was taken at a hotel next to Mickey Mantle's in Manhattan. He was doing a press event, which I was invited to, and I guess coffee. I won't call it breakfast with him.
The other picture, number 5, please.
Yeah, that's the
row.
Yeah, it's the book I wrote on Federer with a foreword by John P. McEnroe, who's John McEnroe's dad. He's no longer living. He was a partner at the law firm of Paul Weiss in New York City. And of all the books that I've been involved with, that's my favorite cover.
My favorite tennis player, if you're interested, of all time, who do you think it might be?
Jimmy Connors?
Chrissy Evert. Come on.
Oh, okay.
Chrissy Evert.
Okay.
Okay. Let's talk about how you go about writing a book. Let's talk about directly the book about madness of the Ivy basketball. You wrote it with other people as well, did you not?
Yeah. So I was sitting at the Ivy tournament at Columbia University in March, and I had thought it all season. I do a lot of Yale basketball games on the radio, and you go to a lot of games. We sit right near each other. And I was saying, this is a special year in Ivy basketball. There's three really good teams on top: Yale, Princeton, and Cornell. There's two really, really good women's teams, Princeton and Columbia, both of whom got NCAA bids this year. And there's some stuff going on in the Ivy. The lack of embracing NIL in collectives, the unionization effort at Dartmouth, and the defection, which when I was sitting there in early March, I didn't know how many players would defect, leave the Ivy League as undergrads, not grads like Matt Nolan, who you had on a previous show, who left after getting a Yale degree, but kids like Danny Wolf from Yale, who left Yale to go to Michigan, kids like Tyler Perkins from Penn, who went to Villanova, Malik Mack from Harvard, who went to Georgetown. We never, ever anticipated that, but it happened. And all of those thoughts and concepts coalesced into a book. I reached out to two Yale Daily News writers, two daily Princetonian writers, all of whom I knew from sitting on press row, a statistics guy at Harvard who's in a PhD program, the sports information director at Manhattan College, and another gentleman who covers women's basketball. I don't want to say I gave them assignments, but I gave them assignments to write snippets of the book. And I wrote, I guess I wrote probably half of it myself.
The Ivy League, in my opinion, and as you know, I know you broadcast some basketball on WYBC FM 94.3 on your dial. When I was at Yale, I was sports director and did football games and did a show with Coach Carm Koza. I think the respect, that's the wrong word, the interest by the administration in Ivy League sports, especially the major sports, which I would consider to be football, men's basketball, and probably lacrosse, but not even then. I don't think it's as strong now as it used to be. I don't think, for example, and you write in your book about different things about the Ivy League, I don't think they promote basketball like they should. In fact, the fact that you had mentioned in your book that I'd like you to talk about this, elaborate a little bit about how someone had suggested that the Ivy League have its basketball but their meetings right next to it, adjacent to the Big East, in order to get more involvement. And by the way, you said someone suggested that. I don't know the answer to this question, but I'll bet a Pepe's Pizza, and it would be the meatball with regatta cheese and red sauce, that you're the one who made that suggestion that was rejected. Am I right?
Could we go to Modern instead?
Okay, Modern Pizza New Haven is fine also. Do I win the bet?
You won the bet.
Okay. And what that's an example to me of the Ivy League not promoting the great coaches like James Jones, the teams they have. What's going on?
Well, it was even worse than that. The Ivy tournament was at Columbia in New York City. This is the one huge chance to promote the tournament. Big East Media Day was scheduled. I simply said, the day after Big East Media Day, have your media day in person at Columbia, and I will guarantee you that media members at the Big East, and that's probably 50 or 60 media members, will attend. The coaches, from what I've been told, voted 9-7 in favor of it, but they didn't do it, and I don't have a good answer or explanation.
And Richard is very interested in both men's and women's basketball. Let's put up picture number 3. That's Kim Mulkey, correct, Richard?
That's my friend Kim Mulkey, who I met in 2011 at Madison Square Garden. We sat next to each other. We became fast friends. I've followed her at Baylor. She won a national championship, 3 national championships at Baylor. At LSU, she won a national championship. And I just think that along with Dawn Staley and Gino Auriemma, they are the 3 titans of women's college basketball, and she's a great, really intelligent, summa cum laude graduate from college person.
Did you mention Summit as well?
I did not. I got to know her a bit, but she's no longer living.
Right.
So
Okay.
I'm referring to the coaches right now.
Sure. And Richard also had a very good idea. We talked about this. We have a lot of basketball and other conversations, and that was to, I think I have it correct, that to sort of promote Yale basketball. I think, am I not correct, that you suggested to me, I don't know if you did to others, that when these big teams, women's teams come to play UConn from West Coast or whatever, that Yale try to schedule some games around that so they could get, the teams would get 2 games and Yale would get a good game to play against a national contender. Am I right? That was your idea?
You're correct, but it's the men and the women.
Men and women, okay.
Because there's big time men's programs. Not as many now, because there's a lot of neutral court games that the UConns and the Dukes play. So you don't have, North Carolina or UCLA or Houston coming to Storrs, Connecticut or Hartford to play UConn. But when I did mention it to you, and probably 10 years ago, you had those teams coming. And if memory serves, I think the Yale women did get 1 or 2 of those programs to play a Friday game in advance of a Sunday game at UConn.
Yale actually hosted many years ago, men, UNC, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I think it was because Yale played them in the Rainbow Classic or something, and it was a Dean Smith honored request to play at Payne Whitney Gymnasium, which is a gorgeous facility. And I remember Phil Ford got into the arena and there was like 500 people there. And it was, there was a surprise why so few people were there. But if you schedule these kinds of games at a bigger arena, you'd get more attendance. And Richard, I think you mentioned in your book, I know you do, that Yale has had difficulty. We've discussed this before. UConn is afraid. And I will say to all my friends, my sister's a UConn grad, and I've got many friends who are UConn grads. UConn doesn't have the chutzpah to play Yale. And you're going to tell me the reasons why and what the efforts are. But to me, they don't have the guts. Why doesn't UConn play Yale?
So I spoke to somebody involved with the UConn program, and I was told that UConn, and they do, plays 5 strenuous out-of-conference teams, usually at Madison Square Garden or at another neutral facility. They play some buy games, BUY games, in which they pay the likes of, let's say, Howard University, Towson, or Bryant to come to Storrs or to Hartford, but they don't play 70-30 games. And a 70-30 game would be characterized as a game in which you would theoretically have a 30% chance of losing to a team that, in your mind, in your fans' mind, it just doesn't sound right. UConn losing to Yale? Well, wait a minute. We've won 2 straight national championships. How could we lose to Yale? The theory is, I don't agree. The theory is it would be deflating.
You mentioned how you first got interested in basketball, college basketball. When I was a young kid, and I'm younger than you are, but not that much younger, WTNH TV in New Haven, Channel 8, I grew up in Shelton, Connecticut, would broadcast the Yankee Conference games. And to me, a big game was always UConn, Rhode Island, UConn, UMass, and UConn Yale was a big game. And in those days, I have to say I rooted for UConn. And guys like Toby Kimball, Wes Balsukti, and those guys. And that brought a lot of fan attention to the state of Connecticut. And even though UConn now is, in a different category, they're in the top 10 of the country historically as a blue blood, minimum top 10, you might say they're +1, above 1, but they're very highly rated. So they don't need the UConn-Yale matchup. But that was a big thing as a young kid. It's unfortunate that we've lost that kind of activity.
No doubt, but I would be happy to go before a judge with you. I would take the position that UConn is the number 1 program in the country right now.
Well, if you combine men and women, yes.
No, I'm just talking about the men.
We've had this discussion before. My niece is getting married, and we went to an engagement party, and there were all these UConn people who were there. We had a little bit of discussion about that. UConn is clearly a great program. They've won 2 championships in a row. And they're clearly, I said top 10, I didn't say we're in the top 10, but it's a great program. And if they happen to win again this year, then you will be right. You'll be definitely right about that. Let's get a picture here of, let's see, picture number 4. Is that a drink that I'm very fond of, an Arnold Palmer drink?
You mean this?
Yes, that's the one.
Right.
How'd you know Arnold Palmer?
I developed a relationship with Mark McCormack in 1998. I met him at a cocktail party in Stamford, Connecticut. He was Arnold Palmer's agent, and that was actually the first really significant agent relationship in 1959 between Arnold Palmer and Mark McCormack. It was a handshake relationship, never codified into a written contract. And McCormack said to me at one point in time, "You know more about Arnold Palmer than anybody except his wife, Winnie. I'd love to get you guys together." In any event, I got together with Arnold Palmer at Bay Hill Country Club in March of 2005. And we had a great chat. He took me and my wife to lunch. And I think he probably agreed that I might know more about him than he did.
Let's go to, before I get more back into your book, let's go to number 7, because you all know that'll be my favorite picture you have right here. Oh, that's sorry, the wrong one. That's not the one. Go to, the one with I think probably number 8 in your thing, Jonathan. If you haven't, there it is. That's Coach K, Duke basketball coach, retired Duke basketball coach, and Richard. Do you remember where that was, Richard?
I don't actually. No.
I first met Coach K because of Richard Kent. Do you remember the story, Richard, about Fairfield playing at Yale? Fairfield University Stags back in the late 90s. I think it was the year that UConn beat Yale in the championship game. It was the first game that year, so the 1998-99 season.
You mean UConn beat Duke in the
right? So UConn beat Duke. I'm sorry, I meant to say that. Yeah. Sorry. And Richard said to me, "Hey Bob, why don't you contact the Fairfield Citizen and tell them you'll cover the game for them? Just get me the press pass." And so I did, and the Fairfield Citizen gave me a press pass. I said I would cover the game for free, whatever. They paid me actually, and I got to meet Coach K. And actually, you and I met Coach K once. I think it was when we went to see tickets you got for me through Coach Jones, Zion Williamson, right? Was that the year?
Correct. Yeah.
Richard, tell me what your inspiration was to write this particular book that you've written on the Ivy League.
My inspiration was a love for Ivy League basketball, which I do think is different. The good news is it's different. The bad news is it's different than any other aspect of college basketball. The quality, especially at the top, is really, really good. I agree with you 100%, 150% that the commitment on behalf of the universities is certainly not as good as it is at a UConn or a Duke or a school like that. And these are true student athletes. I've got I text and email with so many former Yale and Princeton basketball players. These are guys that worked really hard in college, did really well for themselves in life, have great jobs, lawyers, doctors, in the finance fields, and they're just all around good people whose primary motivation in going to a Yale, a Princeton, whatever, was the academics. It was the 40-year decision, the long-term decision. But they are really good basketball players. In this coming year, we're going to have, once again, Yale and Princeton, and Brown replacing Cornell as the top 3. But Yale has some tremendous players coming back. John Poulikitis and Besma Bang, Nick Townsend, and Princeton has a dynamic duo of Xavier Lee and Caden Pierce. That 1-2 guard forward duo, I think, is as good as any 1-2 guard forward duo in the country. And that includes the Dukes and the UConns.
That's a pretty high recommendation coming from you. One thing that bothers me is, well, a lot of things bother me about the Ivy League, how it conducts itself. But we had Matt Knowing. I had Matt Knowing on my show last week. Matt Knowing graduated from Yale. He was captain, local Connecticut kid, and he got a COVID year. The Ivy League did not play basketball at all that year, and and there were obviously a lot of teams didn't play. And so the NCAA, which governs basketball, gave kids an extra year of basketball eligibility. But the Ivy League would not allow that. So when Matt Nolan graduated from Yale this past year, 2024, he had to go elsewhere, and he ended up going to USC, University of Southern California. And it's a shame that the Ivy League, if you're in the NCAA itself, there are some rules that you should probably follow to make it fair. And I think it's not fair that Yale lost. I bet you Matt Nolan would have stayed at Yale for another year, make an even better team. Richard, when you talk about the Ivy League, tell me where you see the Ivy League being in the next 3 to 5 years. Do you think it's going to take a step backward? I asked that question of Coach James Jones several months ago. What do you think is going to happen 3 to 5 years from now with the Ivy League basketball and football?
I think we're going to continue to see really good Ivy League players leave unless the concepts of NIL and collectives are embraced more. And I mean, listen, kids are still always going to go to Yale, Harvard, and Princeton. I'll list those three. Quality basketball players, quality kids, and there's quality coaches in the league right now. So I really don't think there's going to be a significant drop-off.
When we asked that question of Coach Jones, I believe his answer was that whatever the rules are, he'll do his best and produce the best teams he can. I don't like the idea I like the idea that kids, if they can get on a commercial on TV and can get paid for it, that's fine for their images, name, image, and likeness. I don't like the concept of players being literally paid. Now, people will say to me, oh, well, Bob, they've been paid just before it's under the table. Now it's big time. I used to think that a kid would choose, for example, Cooper Flagg, who was the best college basketball player, high school player this past year. He's a freshman now at Duke, and deemed to be, theoretically, we'll see what happens, one of the best college basketball freshmen to come in since LeBron James or whatever. But I like to think Cooper Flagg chose Duke over UConn because of different reasons, the environment, the school, whatever. I'd hate to hear down the road that he chose, I don't know if it's a fact, but he chose Duke because he got $1 for his NIL deal, and UConn only paid him 75 cents. I would hope that we keep college basketball at some modicum of amateurism. I also would, by the way, eliminate any rules that prohibit when you go to the NBA. As far as I'm concerned, if LeBron James could have played in the NBA at age 16, don't have the farce of having the kid be forced to go to college for a year. And the rules are difficult now. Any comment about that, Richard?
Cooper Flagg did not go to Duke because of money. That I will.
That was a hypothetical I was giving you.
Yeah, no, that was not the condition precedent to him going to Duke. But yeah, listen, I agree with everything you just said.
Your favorite college basketball game you ever attended in person?
Favorite game was the 1979 Holiday Festival at Madison Square Garden. The teams were Duke, St. John's, Rutgers, and Ohio State. The championship game, Duke was supposed to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated.
I was there.
Championship game was Rutgers, Ohio State. Duke lost to St. John's, and Ohio State. I know Duke lost to St. John's, and I know that Ohio State beat Duke. Rutgers beat Ohio State in triple overtime. James Bailey had 38, I think, and Kelvin Ramsey for Ohio State had 37. It was the greatest game I've ever seen in person.
Duke actually went the year before that. They played the NCAA championship game against Kentucky. That's the Jack Givens game. And Duke came in that year, the following year, to be preseason number 1, et cetera. And I was devastated at that. My best game I ever saw, and you know what the answer is, Duke, Kentucky in Philadelphia, the Leitner game. And the interesting
it had the that game had the drama of, an iconic shot. This game that I'm referring to, it's not a national championship game. It's a holiday festival championship, but it went 3 overtimes, and I think there were 30-plus lead changes.
The Duke Kentucky game was in overtime, and Leitner was 10 for 10, and they had the stamping on the Timberlake, I think his name's chest. But in any event, that was my favorite game. How about your favorite Yale game?
My favorite Yale game
that you attended.
was the 2016 victory over Baylor in the Providence Civic, the Dunkin' Donuts Center, the Providence Civic Center, which was Yale's first NCAA win ever. Yale then proceeded to lose to Duke 2 days later in what also was an excellent game. Duke was up by as many as 18 or 19 points, and Yale cut it to 3 and had the ball with under a minute to go. But Duke ended up winning by 7, I believe.
I was at that game also, and I was sitting in front and back of Chris Dudley and other Yale players. That was a great game.
Well, I'll tell you also, I said this on your last show. If you were sitting in front of Chris Dudley, you were sitting in front of Justice Brett Kavanaugh, because they were together.
They were together. Well, I didn't recognize Justice Kavanaugh, and quite frankly, I'm glad I didn't know who he was and that I knew he was there, because I'm not a big fan. I'd say to you, my favorite Yale game that I ever saw might have been a loss. I mean, I love the games I've seen, but I think the game that we saw Zion Williamson when we went down to see Duke play, Yale play Duke down there, just seeing him play was exciting. But my favorite Yale win, of course, would have to be the Baylor victory in 2016. Richard, we only have a few minutes left. I want to give you a chance to tell me how would people get a hold of you if they want to read your book. It's fascinating. I got it last night.
You've never shown the cover. Show the cover at least.
Well, don't you have a copy of it?
It's better coming from you.
Okay. The Madness of Ivy Basketball.
Madness of Ivy Basketball. It just came out last week. It's not physically in bookstores. It's in other ways to get it. And if you have a question about how to get it, you could email me at rkent at M as in Mary, B as in boy, N as in Nancy, LLP.com, or you could just do a search on the internet.
Richard gave me an autographed copy of the book last night and wrote a very, very personal note to me. It said, "To Bob, Richard," which is indicative of the dry sense of humor that we both have. Richard, it's always a pleasure talking to you. You and I have not discussed today in this show intentionally the 2024 presidential elections. I wanted to keep this about basketball.
Is there an election this year?
Yes, this is election this year. And I intend to have a show sometime down the road with a panel of 4 or 5 people to talk about the election, because it's a very important election. But for today's show, I want to thank you very much for your interest in college basketball, for your friendship, and for the fun that we have had at many, many games. And I couldn't do a show justly with you without mentioning Greg Stamos' name, because he's probably as big a Yale basketball fan as there is. And I want to thank you, Richard, for your activities. And I wish everybody, you should think about buying the book. I'm not hawking the book from the bayou, but anything Richard writes is very interesting.
Thanks, Bob.
You're welcome. This has been Bob Potster on The Bob Yo Show. Have a great day.